Good morning, lovely people. It's Motivational Monday here, and it's what day of the week is it? I have no 27th of July. I should know. It's my granddaughter's third birthday today. So 27th of July, and today we're talking about why spontaneous is not always a good thing. Or doesn't always work. And the reason I'm talking about this is because quite often people want to sort of go with the flow and be very intuitive and trust, and that's all great, so long as one thing. As long as you've actually got the foundations within your own system of what works for you. So if you understand what you need to work, learn, and live at your best, you know what you need to work, learn, and live your best with other people. When you're making spontaneous decisions, then there's a really good chance that when you say yes to things or no to things, it's going to be aligned with what works for you in your system. And even if it's not aligned with what works for you, generally, you'll be consciously aware of it, and you'll know that doing this short term won't have a massive detrimental effect on you. So what I'm talking about is that sometimes we can do things very spontaneous in the moment and just go with the flow, would be very reactive. But what if fundamentally your decision-making process was flawed because you were not including what works for you? You were being more reactive because you're trying to prevent conflict, don't want to upset anybody, don't want to let people down. So you keep managing things so that you're doing spontaneous reactions and actions in the moment. But the basis of doing them is on what works for other people without it actually being what works for you. So that's one reason spontaneous doesn't work, is often it only works if you already have a solid foundation of who you are and what works for you. Second reason, I'm just thinking about this actual video. Someone's just joined us today. Please do say hello below and let me know your name in the comments. That'd be great to hear from you. Another reason why spontaneous doesn't always work is if you like doing the video today. Usually I get up quite early on a Monday morning and I have lots of time to process and reflect. And so it may well be spontaneous, but of course something comes to me intuitively about what I'm going to talk about. And I think about my last week and I think about things that happened. The downside of doing it that way is that because the brain isn't particularly good at necessarily tracking all of the things that happened, I could be repeating episodes that I've done before. Or if, like me, I had a bit of a difficult night last night, it wasn't very well. And having not had a lot of sleep, cognitively, my processing capacity this morning is not at its very best. And so I just became aware of it. If I'd had a plan and I'd written down that 24th of August, this is what I was going to cover, then I wouldn't have had to do that pre-thinking. I wouldn't have had to do that processing. I could have just got up and known this is what I'm going to talk about. So another reason why spontaneous doesn't work is if we get into overwhelm or our brain is not able to take any more decision making, is that we end up in a situation where we can't think as clearly as we'd like to in the moment. And so with that in the mind, is the reason I mention this because I know that a lot of my clients tend to find themselves in a position where they lose motivation because they're tired, because they're exhausted, and they're just so they plan everything out meticulously. Then they leave no space for spontaneity. And then, or they go the other extreme where there's no plan at all, and spontaneity is the name of the game. And so, if you sort of imagine, sort of like really plan to the nth degree is one end of the scale, and spontaneity is the other. When you have a balance of the two, when you have, even if the planning and structure is based on the fact you know yourself well enough, you know what works for you, then when you're being spontaneous, it's in context of a structure that you know will work. Or you consciously know that if you do this for a period of time, you're not going to get, you're going to be taken off track a little bit, but you know that how long you can do that for. So just thinking about that for the moment, for you, I'd love to know what your explanation, your definition, your experience. Spontaneity for you is like what? And planning for you is like what? Because I see so many people who don't want to plan because they feel that they lose their spontaneity. But what if the planning, the thinking that goes into the planning is more like drawing some penciled framework, and then you can rub them out and reorganize them as you want to and be more spontaneous in the moment. But by having a plan, you have some concept of what has to happen in this time frame. The order they happen might change, but the crucial important things that need to happen are then have been consciously thought about, and therefore you know that you have the time and you have the resources to get them done if you've planned them in advance. If you don't do that, then what tends to happen is even when we've got time to be spontaneous, we perhaps got ahead thoughts of things that we could have done, should have done, and that niggly feeling that something needs to be done. So even when we're off, we're not really off. We're not really sort of able to be present at the moment. We're sort of trying to wrangle through our brain, thinking, I'm sure there's something else I'm meant to be doing. So having a think about it for you, spontaneous is like what? Planning is like what? And if planning feels like it's a restrictive straitjacket that's really holding you back, and spontaneous feels like it's like floating around and there's no structure, it's working out what would work best. And for some people, you don't have to change, by the way. If your spontaneity is absolutely working for you, that's great. And if your planning is working for you, and what I've discovered is that over the years of doing this with people is that their perception of planning was it was very restrictive, rather than that you can plan for spontaneity. Is that when you have a clear plan, you'll have more flexibility in your mindset, because you'll know that what has to be done is planned for, and there's a way of getting it done. But then in between that, you can be spontaneous. So for example, there are some things in my plan, like my 9 o'clock video on a Monday morning, that isn't negotiable. That comes out at 9 o'clock. However, because I have a plan and I'm off for 3 weeks, I've already pre-recorded the next 3 weeks and they've been scheduled. So you'll have your videos, but I won't be there personally live doing them. So that's where the planning's helped. So now I can be spontaneous. But equally, when I know that I've got these videos to do live normally, it means that these are sort of flagpoles, like 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, I have the video to do. Then after that, I can be spontaneous throughout the day. So just thinking about that, I'd love to know your experiences. Spontaneity for you is like what? And planning for you is like what? Let's share our experiences, because if you have an aversion to planning or spontaneity, it will probably impact the way that you work, learn and live with other people, particularly because it's great to work in diverse pairs. So if you've got somebody who likes to really plan everything, they might make you feel like you're being sort of held back and crushed down, and you can't be left to run freely. Equally, if you're working with somebody who's very spontaneous, it might feel like it's all like a bit loose and it's not really very free flowing. But there's a good chance that there's some really good things to learn about each other by being curious about each other's spontaneity and planning models. And then when you get curious about that, then working, learning and living with each other becomes much easier. Hope that's of use to you today. Please let me know your thoughts, and I look forward to hearing your models later on today. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.